Welcome to the Sentinel's presentation on money, a series of short videos on how money and credit affect the economy and your investments. Well, what is an economy? An economy is essentially an expression of what people do. On a fundamental level, it involves the exchange of goods and services. We can call that barter. Something known as a double coincidence of wants indicates that you have something I want and I have something that you want. For a barter transaction to be ideal, it has to be subdivided. We'll get to that in a second. Imagine that we have an economy where I produce a tractor and it's agreed that it can be exchanged for 1,000 pairs of shoes. But what if I only need one pair of shoes? And furthermore, what if I really don't need shoes and I want to trade my tractor in for shirts? In order to solve this economic problem, I need to introduce a medium of exchange. A medium of exchange is something that everyone agrees has value. It is a unit of account, which means it's divisible. And it solves the problem that I had earlier where I didn't necessarily want 1,000 pairs of shoes, but I simply wanted one pair of shoes. Our economy adopts these gold rings as a medium of exchange. The gold ring requires some effort to make, and everyone agrees that it has value. So in order to conduct a transaction that we had previously, we agree in the economy that one gold ring can be exchanged for one pair of high-top tennis shoes. Likewise, 1,000 of those gold rings can be exchanged for one tractor. So it maintains the relationship of one tractor to 1,000 pairs of high-top tennis shoes as we had in the example before. The medium exchange then makes both transactions possible. Throughout history, gold, silver, even seashells have served as a medium of exchange. In each one of these cases, you have some degree of scarcity associated with each item. There's some potential human effort involved in creating the medium of exchange, and perhaps more importantly, everyone in the economy agrees that that medium of exchange has some value. While it was nice to have gold and silver and perhaps other artifacts be a medium of exchange, for reasons of practicality and security, some participants in the economy thought it might be best to store their medium of exchange in a warehouse. And the warehouse then would issue a certificate as a substitute or a proxy for the gold or silver that was stored in that warehouse. These certificates circulated as a medium of exchange and of course could be used in commercial transactions. Think of these deposit warehouses as probably one of the first forms of deposit banking. The certificate holder can then present a certificate to this warehouse in exchange for gold or silver or whatever was noted on the certificate. And again, think of this as a precursor of a demand deposit. The warehouse owners realized that not all certificates in circulation would be presented for redemption at the same time. Recognizing this, they came up with a clever idea. What they did was they created additional certificates in excess of the gold or silver that they had in storage. What the effect of that was what we consider inflation, which is again the creation of more paper than there actually is material value in that warehouse. Another way to consider what occurred at that point in time was that this was really the precursor to fractional reserve banking, which again is the creation of additional credit in this case in excess of the actual value that's stored in a bank or in this particular case a warehouse. During the Revolutionary War, the young government of the United States had a very interesting choice in determining how they were going to mobilize an army to fight the British. A couple of choices were available to them. Choice 1, tax their citizens. Choice 2, find a monetary way to accomplish the same thing. Which one do you think they chose? Of course, taxing is never a popular option, even for a war to expel the British from the newly formed American soil. So government chose the monetary route. The monetary route involved the creation of a continental dollar. Continental dollar was going to be used for the repayment of government debt and was redeemable in gold. But like the problem that we had earlier with the warehouses creating excess certificates, the amount of gold that they held, the continental dollar essentially did the same thing. By the end of the war, the inflation that had ravaged the continental dollar was such that it took over 16,000 continental dollars at the end of the war to purchase what 100 continental dollars did at the very beginning of the war. And in fact, it gave rise to the phrase, not worth a continental. Throughout the history of the United States, government notes did circulate as a medium of exchange. In some cases, you had a government note that was actually exchangeable for either gold or silver. In the example that you see, a $5 silver certificate was in fact equal to that amount of silver and could be presented as such to the Treasury. During the Great Depression, as a means to combat the devastating economic effects that had wreaked havoc on the U.S. economy, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt outlawed the private ownership of gold. Which then begs the question, what is the value of this piece of paper that we're looking at if it can't be exchanged for gold and silver? Let's take a look at what we use for money today and see if it satisfies the Sentinel's 4 essential criteria. Is the dollar a medium of exchange? Yes, I would say so. Everybody seems to accept it. Is it a unit of account? Yes, it is divisible. We have various denominations of the dollar, 1, 2, 5, 10, etc. Can it be used for the payment of goods and services and repayment of debt? We would tend to agree that that's the case as well. However, is it a direct store or representation of wealth? Well, that remains to be seen. When we look at what wealth is, we define wealth as a material item produced by human effort having exchange value. And exchange value means it is tradable or substitutable for something else. So would you say that our present money is wealth? Before we answer that question, let's take a look at our money's evolution. Presented on the screen is a $100,000 note circa 1934. And let's take a look at some of the characteristics of that $100,000 note. On the left, you'll see that it indicates its legal tender. Legal tender means that the government decrees that this has value and that it must be accepted in commercial transactions. If you went somewhere with a $100,000 bill and you presented it to the merchant in a commercial transaction, he could not refuse it. Let's take a look at what's on the top. It says on deposit at the U.S. Treasury. So what this tells you is that there is something that this can be exchanged for at the U.S. Treasury. And that something is indicated at the bottom. The bottom of the note indicates that whoever presents this note, essentially to the Treasury, could redeem it for $100,000 in gold. Here's a note from 1957. Once again, to the left, the note indicates that it is legal tender. On the top, it says that something's on deposit in the U.S. Treasury. And on the bottom, it says that whoever has this note can exchange it for $1 in silver. Here's a note from 2003. Once again, on the left, indicates that it's legal tender, so it must be accepted in commercial transactions and for the payment of debts, both public and private. At the very top, however, doesn't say that anything's on deposit. It simply says it's a Federal Reserve note. And at the bottom before, it indicated that the bearer would be paid some amount of either gold or silver. Well, now at the bottom of this note, it doesn't say it's going to pay anything. So the question again that would be asked is, are present money truly equal to wealth? Referencing our earlier slide, I think it's fair to conclude that our present money does not satisfy our definition of money since it's not a direct store representation of wealth. That is to say, it's not exchangeable for anything. Well, if in fact the dollar bill that was used in the example earlier does not represent any wealth, do we have any money today that actually does represent wealth? In fact, we do. If you look at the left side of the screen, you'll see a U.S. silver dollar. The U.S. silver dollar indicates that its monetary value is $1, and it's also approximately 1 ounce of fine silver. But are they worth the same? Do they represent the same amount of wealth? The thing on the left and the thing on the right. They're both legal tender. They're both designated as $1. But if you had to go out and buy a soda, would you use the item on the right to buy it, or would you use the item on the left? And why would that be the case? My suspicion is that you use the item on the right to purchase a soda versus the item on the left. At current value, the item on the left may be worth 9 or 10 of the units that are on the right. But again, both are designated as legal tender. Both are designated as $1. But we know instinctively that there is intrinsic value to the item on the left, the silver coin, versus the item on the right. That gives rise to something known as Gresham's law, which says that the bad money drives out the good, in which case the bad money is the piece of paper that's on the right side of the screen, and the good money is what's on the left. People will hoard or keep or store the item on the left side of the screen versus what they have on the right side of the screen. Thank you for viewing this short video by the Sentinel. You can check us out at www.thesentinel.biz.